Lines from the GB newsroom. The King says he's greatly saddened by the sudden death of Alex Salmond, the former First Minister of Scotland. The Alba Party leader died yesterday afternoon, aged 69, from a suspected heart attack during a trip to North Macedonia. Mr Salmond had made a speech at the Institute for Cultural Diplomacy Forum and is understood to have collapsed at lunch in a crowded room. There will be a post-mortem examination to confirm the cause of death. Jonathan Reynolds says it's not the government's position that P&O Ferries is a rogue operator, despite a press release this week calling them a rogue employer. P&O Ferries' owner, DP World, will attend the International Investment Summit tomorrow. They'd previously threatened to pull out of the event and a £1 billion port investment after the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, criticised their employment strategy and called for a boycott. The operator was criticised by politicians from both main parties in March 2022 when it suddenly sacked 800 British seafarers and replaced them with cheaper, mainly overseas staff, saying it was necessary to stave off bankruptcy. The business secretary told GB News' Camilla Tominey that the £1 billion investment will go ahead.
Quickly on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll, of course, talk to them about investments. And I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
Briefly to the Middle East now, Israeli military said that one of its tanks entered a UN post in southern Lebanon while attempting to evacuate injured soldiers earlier today, adding that its actions pose no danger to the UN peacekeeping force. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also expressed his regret of any harm done to UN personnel in Lebanon after 15 peacekeepers were injured in what the UN called a shocking violation when Israeli tanks forcibly entered their base. Israel's UN envoy has also spoken a short time ago, saying it is incomprehensible that the UN is keeping Lebanon peacekeepers in the line of fire. Finally, to the sporting world, England are currently 1-0 up at half-time in their Nations League clash against Finland. Striker Jack Grealish put the Three Lions ahead in the 18th minute. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. More from me in an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good morning and welcome to the Camilla Tominey Show. I'm going to be speaking to the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, about Labour's new plan for workers and also this row over P&O Ferries. I'm also going to be joined by the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Mel Stride. And I'll be joined by Tory leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick, who has made it into the final two for the Battle of the Righties. But will he still be the leading man at the end of the race? And the Labour MP for Dover and Deal, Mike Tapp, will be here to react to that interview with Jenrick, along with the pollster Scarlett Maguire. We've got 90 minutes of punchy politics ahead. Don't go anywhere. Business Secretary Jonathan Reynolds joins me now, having rushed from another interview. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you this morning. Look, I feel a bit sorry for you, Mr. Reynolds, because you're on the broadcast round this morning to talk about this great investment summit that you've got going tomorrow. You've got people from all over the world coming in saying that they want to invest big bucks in Britain, and yet it's been overshadowed by the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, making these choice remarks about P&O. There's even a press release, a government press release here, describing P&O Ferries as a rogue employer, and yet their parent company, DP Group, is poised to invest $1 billion in Britain. So surely the Transport Secretary has to apologise.
Oh, good morning. Yes, nice to be with you. And I am very excited by the investment summit and the money coming into the UK. But look, specifically on this issue, that's not the government's position. The issue, obviously, with P&O Ferries is we're not going to recoil from that. We thought it was wrong, the fire and rehire that we saw, those workers being sacked and then taken back on fewer terms and conditions. But we have changed the law. It was lawful under the Conservative government. It will be unlawful under this Labour government. So where companies accept that, acknowledge that, can work within that framework, we'll of course talk to them about investments, and I can tell you they're coming to the summit and the investment will go ahead.
OK, but isn't this the problem, perhaps, Mr Reynolds, with trying to be both a government of business and a government of the workers, that you're always going to have these contradictions? Some on the left might think, oh, you're completely overlooking the rogue tactics of P&O because basically you've got your eye on a bigger prize, which is the $1 billion that's been committed by DP Group. So, you know, it's a little bit like the politics of Marx, except it's Groucho. Here are my principles, and if you don't like them, I have others.
Well, look, the point is, the key policy point is, we believe fire and hire is wrong. That's why in the employment bill we will make it unlawful. It's changes to how that process works. We'll also, by the way, change some of the maritime laws that allowed this to go ahead at the time that it did under the Conservative government. So we're not changing that position. But of course, where people accept that is not now going to be possible in the UK and can still work with us, we will do so and take it forward. And look, for me, the big picture is always going to be, not only do I think a government can be pro-business and pro-worker, I think it's what's required. I think people in insecure work need better terms and conditions. That's part of what we've announced this week in the employment bill. But I think the country needs higher business investment for good jobs for the future. I think it needs more inward investment. I think we've got to compete harder. I don't think we should be losing out to investments to the French, as we've seen in the last few years. Look, so I think genuinely it's not just about the politics of how you pitch the government. What we need is exactly that platform. Now, what I'm pleased to be able to say is, if you take this week, we've presented that employment bill, big improvement for low-paid workers on fire and rehire, zero-hours contracts, sick pay, unfair dismissal, and at the same time, record amounts of investment coming to the UK next week to the Inward Investment Summit. So the proof really is just if we can do it. And right now, the evidence is that is possible, that is right for the UK, and that's what we're doing.
OK. I mean, Business Secretary, the Federation of Small Businesses has not reacted well to the plans. They've called this proposed legislation a rushed job, clumsy, chaotic and poorly planned. Is it perhaps a reflection of the fact that nobody in the Cabinet have actually ever run a business, that the FSB would react like this? Perhaps you can't identify because none of you have done the job of FSB members.
No, look, first of all, let me say you could look at the quotes from the CBI or Make UK in response to the package. We've been particularly sensitive to the needs of small business. That's why that point about probationary periods, so small businesses can hire with confidence, knowing if it doesn't work out when they employ someone, they've got a lighter touch process at the initial part of the employment contract to end that relationship. And I think that's consistent with giving people stronger rights. And look, the test of any government is, do they deliver on their promises? Can they deliver on the things? 100 days into this government, we've got that employment rights bill. I've been criticised for going too fast and too slow on that. That's the nature of a job like this. But we've got that in place. We've got the investment summit happening. The two things alongside each other, exactly the prescription that Britain needs. Higher investment, but better rights, better paying conditions for working people being generated by that. That's what this government's committed to. And the success or failure of that is whether it happens. I'm really proud to be able to tell you it is happening.
OK. Why wasn't Elon Musk invited this year? He was invited last year. Obviously, his company could invest in the UK and probably create a significant number of jobs that would help Labour's growth agenda. So why has he been vetoed from this year's summit?
No, we've got 300 of the most significant investors, business figures, world investors coming to the UK. I don't think it's right to say why a given person may or may not be invited. I mean, you will know the big Tesla investment has gone to Germany in terms of the Gigafactory, so there'll only be one of those in Europe. And I am really excited and confident by the people who are coming, people who can make decisions that will bring significant amounts of capital to the UK, significant levels of investment, benefiting every part of the UK. That's the criteria. There's no other criteria put on people being invited to the summit. And look, it's going to be a really exciting time to announce what that will mean for Britain.
People might assume it's because he said some controversial things about the UK on his platform X and because he's aligned to Donald Trump. who your colleague David Lammy has been pretty critical of in the past. Is that why Musk hasn't been invited this year?
Look, if you look at the attendees who are flying into the UK for this summit, they would cover a whole range of different political viewpoints, different sectors, different parts of the world that they're from. So it's not some sort of political filter on who the attendees are. It's about who can make the kind of investments, who can we showcase the brilliant things about the UK and the fundamental change in our investability following the election, because we've got stability and an openness to the world that wasn't there in the past. Who can bring those investments? That's the criteria. And like the judgment on whether those were the right people will be when we see the investment figures coming out of it.
We talked about the FSB earlier, and I interviewed somebody from the FSB earlier in the week who was making the point that Labour was really clear during the campaign that there would be no increase to employer national insurance contributions. I know that Rachel Reeves has repeatedly said about not putting up the taxes of working people, but it was also suggested that employers' national insurance would not go up. And yet Rishi Sunak, the leader of the opposition, seems to suggest that maybe the Treasury was planning something on that. He made a point about it at Prime Minister's questions. Can you rule out now for us an increase to national insurance contributions made by employers, not least because the FSB seems to be insisting that the Labour Party gave them that guarantee during the campaign?
No, Camilla, you know I'm not going to preempt a budget just a few days out from it.
Go on.
In terms of our manifesto commitments, it was specifically taxes on working people, so income tax, VAT, employees, national insurance, as well, of course, as a roadmap on things like corporation tax to give businesses stability around that. But the key point here is that the UK needs consistent, stable policy for a decade, not just for 1 year. And actually what I'd say to Rishi Sunak, with all politeness, is if he didn't want speculation about what's in or not in the budget, he shouldn't have left such a mess for us to come in and get. I mean, he had made flagship pledges, things he said were his legacy, this British education standard and all of that. No money put aside for that, no money put aside for public sector pay settlement. So he is responsible for the speculation in some degrees that we're talking about today, but people have to wait just a short period of time for the first budget of the government, the first one by the new Chancellor, and it will be a budget for growth. She's made that absolutely clear.
All right, we'll wait for that budget for growth on October the 30th. Thank you very much indeed, Jonathan Reynolds, for joining us on a very busy morning for you. Great to see you.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
The London premiere of the first Bond film, Dr. No, was 61 years ago.
Wow.
Today, which is just quite something. Let's talk to AJ Chowdhury, who's a Bond movie expert. Actually, I mean, obviously there's been the evolution in the films, but there's still that longevity there. They've tweaked, they've changed, but we still have a passion for it.
Absolutely. James Bond is a British cultural heirloom. From the Ian Fleming novels and the literary heritage to the movies still being produced by the family, the Broccoli family, Barbara Broccoli and Michael G. Wilson. They're fantastic. They're global brand leaders. But also, at the end of the day, they employ lots of people in the film industry. They've kept the institutions in Britain alive and around the world. It's the best filmmakers around the world. Great actors, great stars, but constant renewal and giving us something different, yet something traditional.
I really like this sort of gritty Daniel Craig stuff.
Whereas I don't.
No, you're not a fan. But the genre has changed from something that was slightly comedic, really, quite light and fun, to something a bit heavier. Is that a bad thing or a good thing?
You know, there's renewal. Like, I'm sure people... I grew up with Timothy Dalton. He's my favourite Bond. George Lazenby, the one-off, is in the most critically acclaimed Bond film. And Daniel Craig has made the brand so commercially and critically acclaimed. So we're now all waiting on bated breath for the next James Bond.
Who do you think it could be? Who's your money on?
Nobody knows at the moment.
But Sean Connery came back, didn't he, and made a Bond movie that wasn't officially sanctioned. It's all very bizarre.
Sean Connery came back a couple of times. He left after You Only Live Twice, then came back again, of course, with enough money. He comes back, and there's a complex legal situation. Sean Connery had a kind of love-hate relationship with James Bond. Unfortunately, that's how he's remembered.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Conservative MPs have finally chosen their top 2 for the leadership. And now, it's over to the members. Join me, Christopher Hope, on Thursday as Kevin Badenoch and Robert Jenrick are quizzed by Conservative Party members and myself at our GB News leadership event.
And afterwards, join me, Patrick Christie, from the live studio audience and a star panel as we discuss what it means for the Conservative Party and what it means for you. Decision time, the race to lead, from 7 p.m. this Thursday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show. Lovely to have your company this morning. Still lots more to come. In just a minute, I hope to be joined by the Shadow Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride, who's making his way across London and has been disrupted by a half marathon, would you believe? I'll also be joined by Robert Jenrick, the Tory leadership candidate who has made it to the final 2. Could the former Immigration Minister be the next leader of the opposition to replace Rishi Sunak? We'll see. And Labour MP Mike Tapp and pollster Scarlett Maguire will be joining us to unpick what Mr Jenrick has to say. Now we're going to have a look at the papers with former BBC broadcaster Nicholas Owen. Let's have a chat about the Tory leadership race. You were just saying in the break that you thought the whole farrago around James Cleverly crashing out of that final round of MPs voting, even though he had been in the lead the day before, was extraordinary. What do you think happened?
Incredible. Well, it seemed to be sort of tactical voting gone mad, one way and another, combined with the accusation that Mr Cleverly spent too much time in the pub when he should have been out schmoozing his voters.
He did so well at conference. Everyone was loving this sort of barnstorming speech. He delivered it behind a lectern, whereas Badenoch and Jenrick both kind of freestyled in the vein of David Cameron.
Yes.
And he certainly was the media's favourite.
Yes.
Some people thought it was a bit too swaggering, that speech. And now he's out of it. What do you make of all of these criticisms that are coming from the sort of more wet end of the Conservative Party, that it's wrong to have 2 righties in the final race?
Well, yes, of course. I think they have bad memories of a previous, rather short-lived premiership, and they've got to now trust the membership, haven't they, again? And over to them. But now they've only got the 2 right-wing candidates to choose from. So suddenly they're saying,
do you think?
Well, it's a problem. I think for the Conservative Party, certainly is a problem. But what I love about it is that they're now saying we should change the rules. You know, what you're going to change the rules? What before you finally have this election? Can you do that? I don't think you can.
What do you mean, change the rules to try and end up with a one nation back in?
I don't know.
But why is there always this problem with the parliamentary party being at odds with the grassroots movement?
Well,
the grassroots have constantly favoured Badenoch and Jenrick.
Yes.
Tugendhat and Cleverly. To be fair, Cleverly's popularity has increased over the course of the campaign. He's not done his career prospects any harm whatsoever. In fact, some people say that if Jenrick gets it or Badenoch gets it, they carry the can for a couple of years and then somebody else might come in for the general election anyway, and it could be Cleverly waiting in the wings. Nothing ventures, nothing gained. But why does the parliamentary party always, or some people in the parliamentary party, always want to sort of not let the grassroots have what they want to have?
Well, because of the Liz Truss experience.
Well, is it the Liz Truss experience?
Well, I think it's a lot to do with it, isn't it? And let's just be honest. The Conservative Party membership has gone right down anyway,
Yes.
as indeed has Labour Party membership. But anyway, that's another matter. Gone right down. The people that are left will tend to be the sort of people who go, well, what we need is we need to crack down on immigration. All the old the old Tory slogans that we all know so well, which. Fine. But if you do that, you're going to end up with the sort of candidates that the 2 that they've got.
Well, do you think there's something wrong with these candidates? I should put this to Jenrick.
No, not wrong with them. Of course, it depends on the point of view and whether you think that's going to be beating Labour in the very long term. And that comes back to something you and I just were talking about just before the news, wasn't it? It is going to be a very, very long time. And all this business about the opinion polls going so much against Starmer and so on. Yeah, well, you know, choppy waters. I tell you one thing, I wonder whether we'll have the same Prime Minister in Downing Street come the next election.
Really?
There's just a thought that I throw out.
Develop that thought,
I just wonder whether Sir Keir Starmer, who has many qualities, of course, as we know, and a very senior lawyer and all the other things, but he seems to bring to me the job to me that sort of legalistic approach to life. You know, he's got all the answers as long as they're written clearly on a script in front of him and so forth. Whether that can carry you through a premiership through such very, very difficult times, and you ain't seen nothing yet. No. We tend to forget the war in Ukraine is still rumbling on and dangerous at any time. We still haven't had Israel's response to Iran, which they're still promising. They're still talking about that, which might make everything that's going on in Lebanon look like a sideshow. Sorry to use that sort of language, but there are so many things liable to be going wrong in the next year or two. I just wonder whether that's really going to be the issue.
Mel Stride, the shadow work and pension secretary, used to be the work and pension secretary. Yeah. You were in the Tory leadership race.
I was.
We had a lovely chat here.
We did.
And
it wasn't enough, Camilla.
These endeavours never end well, do they? Politics never ends well. Having said that, nothing ventured, nothing gained for you.
Absolutely, yes.
Who are you backing now, then? Because you had thrown your weight behind Cleverly.
Yes.
Cleverly's crashed out. Who will Mel Stride support? Because
I have not decided.
Oh, come on, Mel.
No, I genuinely haven't.
Announce it on this show.
If I had, I would have done you the courtesy on your show of telling everybody, but I have genuinely not decided
But don't you
yet,
like
so
the
I'm
look
going to
of
see.
Badenoch more than Jenrick? Because she has received some One Nation backing from Damien Green, famously Theresa May's deputy, very One Nation-y, very centrist.
Yes.
Does that then mean that she...
So Rob Jenrick's got Vicky Atkins, of course, and John Lamont and a few others. So I think there is a bit of a mix.
What's going on with these Tories? They're all over
no, I think what we all recognise is that whoever wins this contest, I think they're both two strong candidates that we have in the final.
Are you happy with them both being righties? Because some people
what I was going to say, Camilla, is what matters now is that whoever wins brings the party together. So that means creating a balanced shadow cabinet. That's what I would strongly advise and what I would have done had I won
with a role
the contest.
For you in it.
Well, who knows? That is beyond my pay grade now. That is beyond my pay grade. So that remains to be seen. But no, I seriously, I do think there's enormous talent across the Parliamentary Party representing all the traditions of the Conservative Party, and that needs to be reflected in the shadow cabinet. And if a leader does that, then, you know, that's a big step forward.
I mean, I appreciate they're no longer MPs, but you know, the hissy fits that people like David Gauke and Anna Soubry have rightly prompted people to ask, well, why do you care? You're basically Liberal Democrats in blue clothing. Like, this is the problem with the Tories. Will this party ever be a nest of singing birds? You've got the One Nationers complaining that there are two righties, even though the Tory grassroots wants a righty or two to be put before them. Mel, this has always been the problem with the Conservatives.
So what we've got to do is we've got to move beyond this sort of labelling of left and right. And we've got to recognise that some of the issues that people, for example, have associated with the right, like lower net migration, like clamping down on illegal migration, like lower taxation, actually are common ground issues that the whole of the party can actually agree on. So we've got to focus more on what we agree on rather than one or two of the things that are more contentious.
We'll have to get the whole shadow cabinet to agree to leaving the ECHR. Good luck with that. If you were in the shadow cabinet, would you agree to that?
Hypothetical question, so we're not at that point yet.
No, I love a hypothetical.
I know you do. I know you do.
Just because it's my job to ask these questions.
Absolutely right to ask it, and I fully expected you to do so. Look, let's see where we arrive at. Of course, we don't know who's won this contest yet. We'll have to wait and see, and then we'll have to see what happens. But I am confident that both of those candidates are perfectly capable of bringing the party together and forming an effective shadow cabinet. So that I am confident of.
Should we talk about Jenrick's coming in shortly, and I'm going to ask him this, but what do you think about this suggestion that Jacob Rees-Mogg should be made party chairman? I mean, we love Jacob here, obviously, we're colleagues, but he did lose his seat in North East Somerset. Should we really be selecting a loser to be party chairman? Well, and indeed, a non-MP?
Well, look, we lost a lot of seats that were previously safe, and we can't start on with the premise that, you know, we've got to kind of stay where we are. We've got to expect to get those seats back. So I think under more normal conditions, if I can term it that, I don't think Jacob would have lost his seat, actually.
True.
So I think going forward...
Ironically, he's sort of forced out by Reform, even though he's right-wing and a Brexiteer.
We live in very volatile political times, and Reform is now more of a force than it's been for some considerable period.
So Good idea to have Rees-Mogg as party
I think,
chairman?
look, strong strengths there. So a well-known figure, somebody who within the membership has a distinct following. There's no question about that. Party chairmanship, of course, is about organisation and getting the electoral machine up and fired and running and well-oiled and so on. He has a a strong business background, actually. So I would say those are skills that actually are going to be quite important. So I think some real strengths.
All right, OK, you seem to be quite supportive of that. Should we just talk about workers' rights? You're obviously, this is your brief. You've done a lot of work on worklessness. You've done a lot of work in the past when you were in government
welfare
on benefits
was
and
my
welfare.
brief.
Yeah, exactly. We've now got the Labour Party having tabled their workers' rights plan.
Yes.
We've got a bit of a farrago going on between the Business Secretary, Jonathan Reynolds, and the Transport Secretary, Louise Haigh, over whether P&O are indeed rogue employers. Would you have described P&O as rogue employers in a press release?
No, and certainly not on the eve of an investment summit in which that business had at that point pledged to invest £1 billion in the UK economy. And this is a general problem. So this investment summit has been shackled by the fact that, firstly, it's come before a budget, so everybody is wondering what taxes are going to be levied on businesses, and I expect there will be a number, possibly national insurance for employers, which will be a job destroyer.
Yeah, so Rishi Sunak came up... What intel has Rishi Sunak got on this? Because he came up with this at PMQs. I put it to Jonathan Reynolds. It's fair to say he didn't rule it out.
Well, exactly, that's the point. And,
so you think they will put up employer NICs?
I think there's a risk of this. And let me say, Camilla, if they do that, if you read the Labour Party manifesto, it was very clear. It says that we will not increase national insurance. So unless you are going to argue that employer national insurance is somehow not national insurance, then they will be breaching their manifesto if they do that.
All right.
The fundamental problem was they boxed themselves in. They ruled out about broadly based taxes that raise about 75% of all the taxes raised in the UK. They told the British public that they had nothing to fear about us when it comes to rising taxes, and they're now in a position where they're going to do what they were going to do all along, but they've got a restricted number of options
Although,
now,
are you in a
many of
position
which
to
are
talk about
deeply
tax rises,
unsatisfactory.
Mel Stride?
Well, we
were
went
in government, you presided over the highest taxes in peacetime.
We had COVID, we had a war in Ukraine, we had cost of living pressures, we've spent £400 billion supporting the economy and low-income households, and that inevitably, as in other countries, led to an increase in the tax burden. But we went into the general election, because of the welfare reforms that I was bringing forward, with £18 billion worth of tax cuts, focused actually on national insurance, employee national insurance.
Labour will say, but actually a £22 billion black hole.
Well, that is a fiction, and is part of their problem with the investment summit. Because if you talk the economy down, if you say that everything is doom and gloom, do not be surprised if business sentiment suffers. And what we've seen in all the so-called PMI surveys that we've had over the last 3 months is that is exactly what is happening. And in fact, if you look at the long end of the gilt market, which is about interest rates, the amount that the government has to pay to borrow when it issues bonds, that has been going up as well. Now, there are international elements to that, but undoubtedly talking down the UK economy increases the cost of borrowing to the government. So it is not the right way to proceed, and definitely not on the eve of this investment summit.
Mel Stride, thank you for braving it through joggers and runners to make it into
I
the
will now amble off slowly.
Amble off, maybe put a sweatband on, take some Dextrol energy tablets and get
even
back
thinking
on the
about
round.
it is tiring me out. All right.
Good evening and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through this evening, largely dry across the eastern half of the country, but we will have rain arriving from the west and it'll be turning milder as well. So ridge of high pressure at first, fairly settled conditions, but we do have this area of rain and this frontal system out towards the west with southerly winds developing through the end of Sunday. So fairly patchy rain across the far north, but across the far southwest, Wales, Devon and Cornwall, heavy rain and quite strong winds developing as we head through this evening, quite blustery across the southern half of the UK, and that frontal system slowly moving its way eastwards. Milder for all, particularly across the southwest, but even parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland a touch higher, although there still will be a few isolated frost patches in rural spots. Back to the southern half of the UK though, so quite a damp start. It could be quite difficult driving conditions through the morning rush hour with some spray on the road. But further north, it'll start to become a bit drier and brighter. Certainly places such as Northern Ireland and parts of North East and Scotland, it'll be fairly dry, bright and crisp start to the day on Monday. Further west, across the Western Isles, still lingering on underneath that band of rain and with those stronger winds coming from that southerly direction. Through the rest of Monday, though, that front system does move off in towards the North Sea and it does become drier, particularly across western parts through the rest of Monday. Further north, there's particularly some decent sunshine across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but further south, it's quite stubbornly holding on to that cloud. So mild temperatures, but still fairly cool. Temperatures again into the double figures across Scotland and some bright sunshine. Tuesday will be starting generally cloudier for much of the UK, and notice these winds will be picking up as well. So particularly parts of Scotland will notice a more blustery feel on Tuesday, and then we begin to see some areas of showers moving in from the west. So largely dry on Tuesday, showers spreading in on the west on Wednesday, but it will be a touch drier for most on Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. Robert Jenrick is in the House, Conservative leadership candidate, the man who wants to beat Kemi Badenoch, also the Tory MP for Newark. Mr Jenrick, lovely to see you.
Good morning, very good to be here.
Full of beads now, you're in the final two.
No, it's very good, I'm very grateful.
So why should the membership pick you over Kemi Badenoch, who is, I think, still the favourite among the grassroots? Would you agree with that?
Look, I think it's neck and neck. If you'd asked that question 3 months ago when I was 66 to 1, then you would have said I was rank outsider.
Did you put any money on yourself at 66 to 1?
I didn't.
Shame.
No, I made that mistake. Well, I don't believe in political betting.
No, I think some of your colleagues have got themselves into trouble in the past over that. But why would you be better than Badenoch?
On a serious note, I think I have the serious answers to the big challenges facing this country, whether it is on our borders, where I have a very clear policy proposal. That's let's cap legal migration in the tens of thousands and set it in stone by Parliament. Make it the law of the land. On illegal migration, let's leave the European Convention on Human Rights so that we finally end the farce of the small boats crossings.
You are absolutely speaking GB News' audience language on both of those issues, but they will rightly be cynical. They'll say to themselves, this lot have promised this before. They've promised immigration caps for time in memoriam, and in fact, immigration has only gone up. They'll also be sceptical that you'll be able to convince a big tent shadow cabinet, when in office, to sign up to both a cap on immigration and indeed leaving the ECHR. Mel Stride, who we just had in here, wasn't able to... I said, if you were in Jenrick's shadow cabinet, would you sign up to leaving the ECHR? Oh, well, this is all hypothetical, I don't really know. You're going to have a problem convincing One Nationers to do these things.
Well, firstly, that is why I trade in serious pods. I don't talk in platitudes, because I want to use this leadership election to settle some of these big questions, not just say there'll be a plan in months or years' time. Let's have a plan now, because the public, which is what really matters, are deeply sceptical about the Conservative Party because we failed to deliver on some of these issues in office. That's why I say not just we will bring down the numbers coming here illegally, but we will have a cap set in law. And that's why I say we have to leave the ECHR.
No,
now, I do believe we can persuade...
It's hard to convince other Tories. This is a problem. We've already had, right, what I would call wets, One Nationers, throwing their toys out of the pram because it's a Jenrick versus Badenoch final. Oh, they're too right-wing. So you've now got to persuade some of these people who might be in your tent. And to be fair, both of you have got quite a curious mix of support. You've got Victoria Atkins, who would be considered a one-nationer. Badenoch, I believe, has got, he's not in office now, but she's got the backing of somebody like Damien Green, who's associated with Theresa May. So I get all that, but this has been the problem for successive leaders. You can't convince everyone in the party to do what you want to do, not least if you're on the right.
Well, firstly, as you say, I have got a broad range of people from Victoria Atkins, John Lamont, Ed Arger, to Lord David Frost and Bill Cash and Jacob Rees-Mogg supporting me.
We'll get onto him
so I've built a broad coalition. But where I do differ with others in this leadership contest is I think you have to use the leadership contest itself to settle some of these big issues like the ECHR. Let the members choose. Then we can have a mandate and then unite around that. Because unity doesn't just come about because you wish it so. Unity comes about because you're uniting around something. And that's what I want to do. I want a very clear, specific policies, not just on our borders, also on how we reform our NHS, how we get growth going again in our economy, a different policy on net zero, how you get homes built for young people. I've got the clear answers to the big challenges facing our country. And with that, we've got something the party can actually unite around. And the philosophy behind those things, I believe, is true, enduring, conservative values.
So you can give a guarantee here today that you will not roll back on the tens of thousands cap or indeed the departure from the ECHR if you become leader. I say that because you did vote for Remain and now you're a Eurosceptic, so people might rightly be cynical about whether you can stick to your positions.
Look, these are things I feel very deeply about. Ultimately, these are the causes that I chose to resign from Cabinet about. So your viewers know that I'm willing to take a stand on the big issues that matter to this country.
Let's be honest, let's just go back in time. Did you resign from Cabinet over this, or did you resign because you knew you weren't going to get a big job in Rishi Sunak's reshuffle? You resigned a few weeks before that reshuffle.
Afterwards.
A few weeks afterwards, after that reshuffle in the December of 2023, right? You didn't get the big job. You wanted to be Home Secretary. He gave it to James Cleverly.
No, the reason I resigned, it was a hard decision to resign. Resigning from government is not easy on a matter of principle. That's the reason why I was the only person to do it in the whole
it wasn't because you weren't given a Secretary of State
I resigned
job.
because I had fought relentlessly for the changes that were needed to our legal and illegal migration system, and then I wanted to do more. And so I chose not to give up, but to go into the Parliament, go onto the backbenches and to work with 60 other Conservative colleagues to fight for the change we need. And the principal one, which was obvious to me then and is clear to me now, is that you have to get out of the European Convention on Human Rights if you want to get dangerous criminals off our streets, if you want to get terror suspects out of our country, and if you want to secure our borders. And if members of the Conservative Party vote for me in this leadership election, those policies will be the Conservative Party's policies. They'll be added to the stable of our party. If we win the next general election, we will get on and do them and end this farce once and for all.
One thing I'm not really clear on is your economic policies. What are the, say, three main tenets of your approach to the economy, or what will they be?
I want to get real growth going again in the economy, by which I mean GDP per capita, helping everyone in our country to earn more, not just the overall size of the pie. And I think you do that in a number of ways. Let's get millions of people off welfare into the dignity of work. Well, I want to do what we did in the early days of the coalition with a sick note culture once more, because we've got now far too many people, for example, medicalising normal human experiences under the guise of mental health. We've got to help those people into work.
How do you get doctors to not just sign sick notes because they've only got 10-minute appointments and, frankly, doing anything else is all too difficult?
Well, we have to work with them, just as we did once before under Ian Duncan-Smith. We've got to do so again with mental health. I want to give young people real skills, not just low-value degrees. And I've said we should close the worst universities in our country, turn them into hubs for apprenticeships. You know, 1 in 4 of our young people are leaving university and earning less than if they hadn't been to university in the first place.
But do you not believe in that Blairite ambition to get as many people into university as possible?
No, I don't. Because I did, but my parents both left school at 16. My dad was an apprentice. I would not be concerned. I'd be pleased if my children chose to be apprentices.
I know, but you're in a privileged position to be able to say this because, as you have revealed before, your grandparents paid for you to go to a private school. You did really well there. Then you end up, you know, being hugely successful. You were facilitated in that kind of upward trajectory. You're basically educated beyond your own parents' education because you had financial help. What about these kids who don't have financial help but have high aspirations and are bright enough to get to university? They should get
I want them to have all the opportunities they can access in life. But going to university is not the only way to do that. In fact, the evidence suggests the opposite. If a quarter of our young people are going to university and earning less than they hadn't gone to university in the first place, something is going badly wrong in our universities, and we need to take that on. Do for our universities what we did for our schools in the 2010s. The other big change that I want is to change our energy policy, because we have become fixated on net zero, and we're doing it on the back of working people.
So scrap net zero?
Well, I want to cut emissions, but I'm not going to do it by deindustrialising our economy. I want to pursue cheap and reliable energy. That means backing new nuclear. It means saying that gas is here to stay, even build new gas-fired power stations. Let's cut the subsidies for expensive renewables.
Kind of, ambition 2030, 2035, 2050. Do you want to just remove any arbitrary targets from a net zero?
I would go back to the Climate Change Act. I would change it so that we remove these crazy interim binding legal targets, the carbon budgets. I would certainly fight against Ed Miliband's mad plan to phase out gas by 2030. No serious person believes that's possible without doing immense harm to working people. So I have a plan to tackle our economy. I've thought deeply about this. And if I'm lucky enough to lead the party, these plans begin on the 2nd of November, not in months or years' time. A plan tomorrow is not good enough.
Those comments on net zero are reminding me of Jacob Rees-Mogg, which brings us nicely on to your suggestion that he should be party chairman. So is that how this works? He supports you, you promise him a future job?
No, not at all.
Well, you must have promised him that job. What came first, the promise of a job or the endorsement?
Well, I'd like to think it was the endorsement, because Jacob and I... It was. Jacob and I have known each other for a very long time.
Right.
Jacob is a good Conservative. I've always respected what he's done, trying to get advantages from Brexit, trying to change our energy policy, for example, trying to deregulate our economy.
But the trouble
and the membership, he cares about the party and its members.
I know, but he lost his seat. So you're basically saying that a loser should help you fight the next election.
Well, he lost his seat like hundreds of other good Conservatives did, because we failed to deliver in office. It was not because of the way he conducted himself.
Isn't there a standing MP that could lead the party in that regard, could help to be party chairman? Somebody like Priti Patel, for instance. Why can't she be party chairman? At least she won her seat.
Well, I think the members will be very pleased to hear that a true Conservative who cares passionately about the grassroots of this party...
so you've done it so that the members are favourable to this idea?
No, not at all. Although, far be it that the chair of the party is someone who the members like and respect.
I know.
That would be a shock, wouldn't it, for once?
Well,
let's have a chair of the party who the members actually like.
Say if he is chair of the party, will you just say to him, you start again, tear up everything that CCHQ has done wrong and start?
Yeah, I want to rebuild CCHQ from the ground up. I want to have a different way to select candidates. So we end the favoured sons and daughters of the leader being parachuted in. That was a disgrace.
Yes.
I want to stop members just getting emails asking for money, but never asking what do they want and where do they want the party to go. Let's build a mass membership, democratic organisation. I think Jacob will be a great asset to that.
OK. Robert Jenrick, we have to leave it there. I had many more questions I wanted to ask you, but time is against us. Thank you very much. Good luck in the rest of the Tory leadership race. The result of that is going to be announced on November the 2nd. And, of course, GB News will be following the campaign all the way. And we've got Christopher Hope doing his hustings with Mr Jenrick and, indeed, Mrs Badenoch next week on Thursday. Coming up next, I'm going to be joined by the Labour MP Mike Tapp and Scarlett Maguire to analyse what Mr Jenrick has just said to me about his campaign. Stay with us.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news...
Will, please bring us up to date.
...or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life, stage, screen, published author, 19
TV,
books, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, 7, 8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes, I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, the last is good. There is a Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being, you know, a major icon. And of course, people like Dick Van Dyke, who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
You are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which of course you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names: Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth Taylor, Dean Martin, Gregory Peck,
Richard Burton,
Paul Newman. The list goes on.
Gene Kelly,
and
my
Gene
favourite.
Kelly. Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
The People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Camilla Tominey Show on GB News. I'm delighted to be joined now by Mike Tapp, who is the Labour MP for Dover and Deal, and the pollster and director of JL Partners, Scarlett Maguire. Hello, guys. We're going to react now to Robert Jenrick's interview. I'm interested in what you have to say, Mr Tapp, because you're the new MP for Dover and Deal. He is speaking a very sort of tough game on immigration. He's saying that we need to have a cap on migration into the tens of thousands and we need to leave the ECHR.
Yeah.
I mean, that could be quite enticing to the constituents of Dover and Deal.
So what I say in this, I find it intriguing that Robert Jenrick is coming out as the champion of securing the borders when it was him who was in the immigration minister role when we went from 400 crossing to 140,000. It was Robert Jenrick and the Conservatives that oversaw the opening of the borders.
He says he resigned on principle because he wasn't happy with those numbers.
Well, it was the Conservative government and he was the immigration minister.
Yes.
Labour have got serious policy for this issue. In just 100 days, we've established the Border Security Command. That's vital. That brings in the likes of MI5, those extra powers, the counter-terror tools, which is vital, and we're ensuring that we're deporting those that shouldn't be here.
Have numbers come down, though? No.
Well, actually, if you look
haven't.
at the September that we've just had, that's the lowest since 2020. We've stopped 17,000 crossing. We've had 12 flights off the ground, including the largest on record. That's a true deterrent, not silly gimmicks like Rwanda, which we saw 4 being deported. So we've got a serious plan, but it does take time to implement.
You wouldn't know if Rwanda had been effective because it was scrapped before it started.
Well, we do know that only 4 were deported. We know that it would have taken 99 years to deport all those that crossed in that way.
It was meant to
we
look
need serious
as if
policy
it was a deterrent rather than actually a practical solution,
and
wasn't it? It was meant to put people off.
And a true deterrent is what Labour are doing now, which is those deportations that we're seeing, including the largest on record. And that's really important, I think.
Scarlett, I mean, generally, the electorate, do they trust the Tories or Labour more on bringing down immigration?
That's actually a really great question. I was just looking into the numbers for this for the last couple of days, and even though Labour had a sustained lead on this in the run-up to the election, now the Conservatives are just about overtaking or neck and neck, depending on where you look. So Labour's losing that lead and Conservatives are slowly starting to come up. I think it's an imperfect test in a way because most places that have been tracking this historically don't also ask the question of the Reform Party, which I think was probably a good thing to include.
Yes, exactly. Reform. I mean, that's also a threat to Labour voters now, isn't it?
Well, when you're looking at serious policy that's actually going to be implemented, you're not going to look to the likes of reform, because we saw this in the general election. They'll say anything because they know that they're not going to be in government, so they're not going to have to deliver on those promises.
If boat crossings don't come down under a Labour government, OK, and let's be honest, it's been hard to do it under a Tory government, let alone a Labour government, where you could argue that perhaps the Labour Party isn't quite as ideologically opposed to mass migration as Conservatives might be. I think that's just a general...
Well, actually, if you look at our manifesto commitments, it's to secure the border, and we're working on that. But also when you look at... Keir Starmer
made some remark about all immigration policy was inherently racist.
Well, no, that's not what he believes. And when you look at
he did say that once.
When you look at our policies around legal migration, it's not about putting numbers on it. It's about what does the economy need and matching those two areas.
If you do not bring these boat numbers down, then in a constituency like Dover and Deal, where people are confronted with this issue really up close and personal, actually Labour voters might well go to Nigel Farage and think that he's got the answers, not least if this Conservative leadership race doesn't pan out quite as everyone expects.
I have full confidence in Yvette Cooper and her team to deliver on these promises of securing the border. It's one of my top priorities, it's one of the Home Secretary's top priorities, and we've made it really clear, and I've been on here before and said this, that it's not racist to have these concerns, and we're taking it really, really seriously.
Okay. Scarlett, on the leadership race, first of all, do people care?
Well, some people care. The public as a whole don't particularly care, I think it's safe to say. There's been a few different polls that show that anywhere sort of about 2/3 of the public don't really care what happens in the Conservative leadership contest. I do think, though, the members care a lot, and they're the ones that got the vote over the next few weeks, and so there are people that care.
And who do the members... Because Jenrick is saying, oh, it's neck and neck. Is it neck and neck with the membership? I thought Badenoch was further ahead than him.
No, I think Badenoch was consistently further ahead and consistently the favourite with members when we thought about this Conservative leadership contest before it was even announced. In the run-up to the election, there were quite a few candidates already sort of touting their wares, I think, in anticipation of that result. And Badenoch was, I think, probably the clear favourite then with the members. I think one caveat, members are notoriously hard to poll. And it's quite difficult without wanting to do down my own profession. It's quite difficult to get that right. But at the moment, there are different polls that show Badenoch slightly ahead or Jenrick slightly ahead in head-to-head, so I think it's all to play for.
Interesting. Who do you think that Keir Starmer would fear more at the dispatch box, Jenrick or Badenoch?
I don't think either of them. It's quite interesting to see...
Hang on. Badenoch particularly made mincemeat of Angela Rayner a few months ago.
What I find really intriguing here is the Labour Party had a disaster in 2019, and we stepped back, we reflected, and then we went to the country with a serious plan. The Conservatives have completely failed to do that, but they're messing around with their leadership selections to the point where they haven't really got any choice here.
It may be, Mr Tapp, that you were elected on this loveless landslide purely because people were so fed up with 14 years of Conservatism. Not that many people, Scarlett, in the polling, were many people voting Labour because they absolutely loved Starmer and everything that the party stood for. They weren't. It was a punishment beating, wasn't it?
It was to get the Conservatives out. The overriding message was the message for change, which Labour very successfully campaigned on. They say, you want change, we will be change. I think at the moment, the reason why you're seeing Labour struggle a bit, which I think they are, I think early days and they've got time to turn it around, but it's because voters aren't yet feeling or seeing, I think, even that plan for change. But we might see more of that from the sort of new change that we're seeing.
I mean, what do you make of this More in Common poll today that's in the Sunday Times, basically suggesting that now the Tories and Labour are neck and neck? Is that to be expected? I'd say that's to be expected after maybe a couple of years in office.
It's not easy.
Not after 100 days.
So the first 100 days have been quite interesting. We've actually delivered a lot. So if you look at the fact that our NHS doctors are back in work,
headlines.
Our NHS doctors are back in work. The trains are moving. We've set up the Border Security Command.
Are losing out on their winter
all
fuel.
these things are vital for laying the foundations for growth. But actually, the media are more interested in talking about Westminster bubble nonsense.
You cannot.
And actually, there's a lot going
this has
through.
Been a great start to this government.
Actually, if you look at the legislation we're putting through and the policy, look at the bill for workers' rights.
Nobody's looking at it. They're too busy looking at Lord Alley, looking at the Starmer's wardrobe.
And why is that? And the reason for that is because the media...
the Prime Minister has made a series of catastrophic errors, including filling his boots with freebies and going to the Emirates Stadium every 5 minutes when he should be running the country.
It's because the media decide to amplify that more than they do what we're putting through. And I've seen this left, right and centre.
People like you would be on shows like this, absolutely laying into anyone doing the stuff that Starmer's
but what I'm saying is it's the media that are amplifying these parts. I'm not saying it's the media's fault. I'm saying they're amplifying those parts more than they are the legislation we're putting through.
amplify good stories, like people borrowing apartments from multi-millionaire Labour donors who then end up with Downing Street passes.
Isn't the Workers' Rights Bill a fantastic story for your viewers?
We have been covering... We have spent the morning with Jonathan Reynolds talking about that bill.
And we've seen an imbalance here between the reporting across the board.
Scarlett, how damaging has the first 100 days been on Labour in a nutshell?
I don't think it's been very a good start, but they've got time to turn it around. I do think they're in unprecedentedly bad territory for a new Labour government, but then so is the opposition.
Scarlett Maguire, Mike Tapp, greatly argued by both of you. Love a feisty panel. Thank you very much.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through this evening, largely dry across the eastern half of the country, but we will have rain arriving from the west and it'll be turning milder as well. So ridge of high pressure at first, fairly settled conditions, but we do have this area of rain and this frontal system out towards the west with southerly winds developing through the end of Sunday. So fairly patchy rain across the far north, but across the far southwest, Wales, Devon and Cornwall, heavy rain and quite strong winds developing as we head through this evening, quite blustery across the southern half of the UK, and that frontal system slowly moving its way eastwards. Milder for all, particularly across the southwest, but even parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland a touch higher, although there still will be a few isolated frost patches in rural spots. Back to the southern half of the UK though, so quite a damp start. It could be quite difficult driving conditions through the morning rush hour with some spray on the road. But further north, it'll start to become a bit drier and brighter. Certainly for places such as Northern Ireland and parts of North East and Scotland, it'll be a fairly dry, bright and crisp start to the day on Monday. Further west, across the Western Isles, still lingering on underneath that band of rain and with those stronger winds coming from that southerly direction. Through the rest of Monday, though, that front system does move off in towards the North Sea and it does become drier, particularly across western parts through the rest of Monday. Further north, there's particularly some decent sunshine across Northern Ireland and Scotland, but further south, it's quite stubbornly holding onto that cloud. So mild temperatures, but still fairly cool. Temperatures again into the double figures across Scotland and some bright sunshine. Tuesday will be starting generally cloudier for much of the UK, and notice these winds will be picking up as well. So particularly parts of Scotland will notice a more blustery feel on Tuesday, and then we begin to see some areas of showers moving in from the west. So largely dry on Tuesday, showers spreading in on the west on Wednesday, but it will be a touch drier for most on Thursday. That's all from me. Bye for now.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We love making our audience big cash winners, and you really could be next with £36,000 tax-free cash in your bank account.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it. And if I can win, anyone can win.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB08 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Online dating apps are still the go-to for millions of British adults, with 1 in 10 using them to look for a romantic connection.
Yes, are you one of them? Let us know. But with many apps introducing subscription fees and complex algorithms, the world of online dating has never been harder to navigate. So who better to join us to discuss this than Mr. Tinder himself, Stefan Pierre Tomlin. You have been dubbed Britain's best-looking eligible bachelor.
Yeah, so this happened back in 2016. Got an email from Tinder, and it was like, "You're the most swiped man on Tinder."
So just explain to us, for viewers who don't know, what is swiping? What does that mean on Tinder?
Yeah, so on Tinder, the app, if you swipe left, that means you don't like the person in front of you, and if you swipe to the right, that means you like that person.
Do you mind still being associated with that? It's a good thing.
Well, it made me who I am now, and I love sharing how I was successful, and now I'm like a dating expert.
What's your situation now? Are you with anyone? Are you still single, paying the bill?
So I'm seeing someone at the minute. Things are going well, and I'm a dating expert, so I'm always giving advice to people.
Does she know your title of most swiped?
Of course, who doesn't? It's quite hard. It's quite hard being the most swiped man on Tinder because you get a label on you. So I find it harder than anyone else, to be honest.
And where did you meet her? That's the big question.
At an event.
So not on Tinder?
Not on Tinder, ironically. Yeah.
So for all that troubled online, there's actually a real life rendezvous. Which,
I mean, I have met people on Tinder in the past, and it has worked. Well, it didn't work, but yeah.
I need to know how to do the famous Stefan Smolder.
That camera is not a camera. That is your best friend, that's your lover. So you really smiles from the camera, so it goes like this.
GB News.